All right, hello. This is the chapter 3 um, video. So I'm going to kind of just talk through some of the stuff on the worksheet, as well as kind of talk through what I saw out of the chapter, or out of the chapter itself, out of my reading of the chapter. So let me go back to the beginning of this. But chapter 3 is when things start to get interesting because we finally actually meet Gatsby. And you also notice that we got the house. Oh, I'm going the wrong way. This be easier. There we go. This is the house that supposedly basically inspired the Gatsby. So we get that in the background. But like I said, we meet Gatsby in this chapter, and that's a big moment. So we start off and we get all this information about these parties, and they're huge. One of the things it brings up is just the amount of basically citrus fruit that's brought in for mostly for making drinks, most likely. All the gins and liquors and everything. Remember, this is the time of prohibition, so this shouldn't be this easy to get, but here we have carts full of booze coming in, basically. And then not just like a band, but a full orchestra. It talks about a whole pit full of oboes and trombones and saxophones and viols, which would be either violins or violas, cornets and piccolos, high and low drums. So this isn't 5 pieces or 8 pieces or even like probably 12 pieces. This is probably a full orchestra the way that you would expect to go see if you saw something out of like a Wagner matinee, where the Boston Symphony would probably have a big enough orchestra to have 30, 40, 50 pieces in it. It's probably what we're talking about here. By the way, here's some stuff in the background. My kids are watching SciShow Kids, so they're learning their science. But beyond that, eventually we get to the spot where, and this is question number 3, how is Nick different from most of the other guests? He is the only one who's invited. There's a reason that he's invited, and that should have set off alarm bells in your head, why is he invited? Why are these parties being thrown? Why specifically invite Nick if nobody else gets invitations? And that's a big part of this. And maybe alarm bells don't go off yet, but if you start thinking back to some of the stuff that matters here, then you might notice that a little bit more. Because one of the things you're going to notice, that Gatsby doesn't seem to enjoy these parties. He's there, he talks with a few of the people, but for the most part, he's not out there. Half the people don't even know who he is. But anyway, Jordan Baker's there as well, so she's the person that Nick kind of latches onto and makes him feel more comfortable. We get the weird story with the dress, and then we get more rumors, and the rumors are fun. Rumors are everything from he's obviously the chapter 2 ones include things like that he's the nephew to Kaiser Wilhelm of Germany, to now we've got that he was a German spy, he was in the American army, he killed a man. We get all these different rumors. So Gatsby is a man surrounded in mystery, basically. So Jordan is there with these other people, and it brings up that there is a persistent undergraduate who's there, and he becomes a bigger part of it. If you watch the movie, he's actually a little bit more important, but otherwise, for the most part, he's not very important here. But to move on quickly, we have allies. Allies is this guy who is in the library. He's got big giant spectacles on. He's meant to be seen as this person who is very wise. And he asks, well, what do you think? And he talks about, let me grab a piece of paper. I'm going to need a piece of paper for my next demonstration. He talks about that the books are in fact real. And first of all, this is shocking to him because he thought that Gatsby was just a fly-by-night nobody. But one of the things, the way books are printed, especially, I'm sure they're still printed this way. Weirdly enough, when you become an English major, at least in the upper levels, you get to take a class that talks about bookmaking, which is weird, but whatever. But basically, it's like pages are, folded together, and they print on these pages, and they'll print like if this were 4 pages, so I'm going to do a second print. So if we had a very small book, this might be 4 pages of a book, and they would print it this way, and then there'd be stuff on each side of each of these, but then it would be folded down into this so that you have your actual book. So this would be, page 1, the inside of this would be page 2, page 3, page 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So one sheet of paper could get you 8. But this is uncut, which means you can't get into those inside pages without cutting this, without doing that. And that's why a lot of older books, and of course this looks terrible, but a lot of older books, if you have anyone in your family that collects really old books, sometimes the pages will seem a little uneven. Because most of the time people will use a knife and cut those much better than what I did, but they might have sort of uneven looking pages. And then you've got a little book here. So that's why the uncut pages thing is in there. But as he brings up that some of the books are uncut or that they're uncut at the appropriate time. So Gatsby is either, in a sense, a little bit of a fraud, or he possibly, read these books up to the point uh, of basically of wherever they were stopped being interesting. But it's hard to tell exactly what Allies is getting at here. But I always look at this as Gatsby's Allies. Most people wouldn't catch that he's sort of a fraud in this sense, but Gatsby cares about having the images, of having all these nice things, but he's got books he's never read. And he's got everything else, and it's all just there to be part of this package that, well, we're going to get to soon. That obviously you hopefully know by now the whole idea of it with Chapter 4. But regardless of that, Jordan and Nick kind of run around, they have some fun together, and then they're kind of just hanging out, and this random guy starts talking to Nick and says, "Oh, you're familiar. Were you in the war? You were in this division, the third division." And then he offers to take him in a ride in a hydroplane. And Nick is just like, "Oh, that sounds good. Whatever." Doesn't know who this guy is, but starts talking about how weird it is that he doesn't even know who that these parties are giant. He doesn't even know who Gatsby is. And the guy's like, "Oh, what? I'm Gatsby." And then we have this line. This is one of the spots where I do want to read directly to you. I better get this to where I can have light. He smiled understandingly, much more than understandingly. It was one of those rare smiles with the quality of eternal reassurance in it that you may come across 4 or 5 times in life. It faced, or seemed to face, the whole external world for an instant, and then concentrated on you with an irresistible prejudice in your favor. It understood you just as far as you wanted to be understood, believed in you as far as you would like to believe in yourself, and assured you that it had precisely the impression of you that, at your best, you hoped to convey. And this is a very, very powerful statement about Gatsby, but it is his smile that is the thing that really stands out about Gatsby. And Nick is just like taken aback by how this guy smiles at him. And again, this is one of those things that I don't want to overplay this, but he has this relationship with Jordan, but he also seems to almost be, he has this level of admiration for Gatsby, and maybe that's why that scene at the end of chapter 2 matters. The scene with Mr. McKee, that maybe, maybe this is Nick sort of having a crush on Gatsby, and maybe this is all meant to be hidden, but it might help explain why Nick is just so incredibly positive about Gatsby here. Again, I don't want to overplay that. I don't want to make this book about that because that's a pretty minor part of this, but it can help you kind of understand the lens through which to view the way that Nick talks about Gatsby. So from there, there's some other stuff in here, but I'm going to kind of skip to some other big things. So Gatsby wants to talk to Jordan. Jordan goes off and is with Gatsby for a long time, and then they do kind of meet up for just a moment. But we keep getting all these people are calling for him. Philadelphia wants you on the phone, sir. And he basically says goodnight to Nick, and they make plans that they're gonna basically do the hydroplane thing. But it seems like possibly that never happens. So and then we get the last big moment that I really want to hit on this chapter. I think it's the last one. Yeah, well, a couple last things, but then we get the car accident on the way out. And Allies is in the car, but it's some other guy. And you might just ask, like, what's the point of this? And I would look at it as this shows what kind of people we're seeing in this book. It's not just Gatsby. It's going to be Gatsby. It's going to be the Buchanans. It's going to be these people here that are at Gatsby's party. They're not used to facing consequences. That this guy's basically guilty of a DUI, and granted that wasn't illegal back then, amazingly, but like this guy crashes his car, nearly hurts people, is at the very least inconveniencing all these people who want to get out, and it's just like no big deal, whatever. This guy hardly even like thinks it's a big thing. So that's one of the things that I think is worth bringing up. And the other thing then is, of course, talks about how he loses sight of Jordan Baker for a while, but that eventually they get back together. And we get the moments where it talks about that she was incurably dishonest and careless as well. That she says, he says to her, "Suppose you ever meet someone as careless as yourself." "I hope I never will," she answered. "I hate careless people. That's why I like you." She suspects Nick to be very predictable, and that's why she likes Nick, because Nick is safe. And the other thing that we get is the last line, which some people look at Nick as a unreliable narrator. I think he is probably a reliable narrator, but it's either a great line or it's a greatly ironic line. "Everyone suspects himself of at least one of the cardinal virtues, and this is mine. I am one of the few honest people that I have ever known." So this is the type of stuff we're seeing with Chapter 4. We get the introduction of Gatsby. We get more rumors, which the rumors are fantastic because we're not going to settle on many of these rumors in Chapter 4 either. Now we're going to get Gatsby's version of it, but that'll be in the next video. But the party, the availability of liquor, the fact that these people face no consequences, and the fact that Gatsby's throwing these giant parties, invites Nick, and seems to not enjoy these parties are all key points that I want you to get out of this. So that's it for this one. Chapter 4 coming next.